Hey everybody, welcome to this video. So you want to start writing for your college newspaper. Let's talk about 10 things to keep in mind to make your writing better from article to article.
You actually like the school paper? You actually like the school paper?
So please note that there are plenty of additional tips and things to go over. We're not really talking about, for example, the inverted pyramid or story structure, but these are some important things, some more basic things to keep in mind.
Where do I start? Where do I start?
Where do we start? Where do we start?
So the first thing to mention is you want to avoid first person. Often in life, as a student, you are writing in first person, I think, I believe, in my opinion. And often if you watch television news, you will see a journalist and interviewer say, I sat down with so-and-so to get answers, I interviewed so-and-so, things like this. And people can be so proud of themselves sometimes for writing in first person.
He's the first person I got to use first-person narrative. He's the first person I got to use first-person narrative.
I don't know how all these clips are playing twice instead of once, by the way. Kind of ruins the humor. Anyway, we've seen TV news do this a lot.
I sat down with accomplished wordsmith Chris Griffin. I sat down.
And because of that, often rookie journalists, newbies who are sitting down to write for your campus newspaper the first time, they will write in first person. But that's wrong. You don't need to show up as a character in your feature story, in your sports story, in your news story. Avoid first person like the plague. Second tip, you want to interview the best source possible. I had students years ago write about the opening of a new restaurant, which is fine. There aren't that many new restaurants opening in our small town that often. And so that's fine as a story idea, but they did not interview the owner, nor did they interview anyone who had actually been to the restaurant. They actually interviewed someone who said, I drove by once and it looks really nice from the outside, which is about as worthless as you can get. I know it's easier to talk to your best friends, your suite mates, your teammates, your significant other, but rarely are they the best source. You want to go to the person of authority and talk to them about whatever your topic is. So if you're interviewing people about the play, you should talk to the director of the campus play. You should talk to some actors in the play and base your story around the best sources possible.
Can I talk to you for a second? Can I talk to you for a second?
Because of that, I know it can be challenging sometimes to get people to agree to an interview, and I know it's easier to DM someone or to email someone a list of questions and to hope they email back with a list of answers, but often that feels very rehearsed, very stale and stiff. If you actually have a face-to-face conversation with someone or even a phone conversation with someone, the interview is going to be a lot better. So I recommend going to talk to the person in person.
In person?
Yes, in person.
Also, it's easy for someone to kind of blow off your email, to ignore a message that they received, a text, to sincerely or to pretend to write someone back and, oh, I forgot to write you back, that sort of thing. I forgot. It's easy to let that happen. But if you show up in person to interview a coach and say, hey, I'm writing an article for the school newspaper. Is there a time we could sit together this week and talk? Only a jerk is going to tell you no. You're going to get lots more yeses for interviews if you ask for that interview in person.
In person?
Yes, in person.
In person?
Yes.
The next tip, every article needs a student's perspective. We are the student journal, the student newspaper, the student account of record. So if you look at kind of our subheading underneath where it says the Patriot, it will say the official student newspaper of the University of the Cumberlands. So every article needs a student's perspective. Now, they may not be the best source. You might be interviewing someone at the dean's office, a university vice president, a professor, a club director. But every article, whether you're talking about a CAB event, a sporting event, a campus security issue, needs a student's perspective. And usually what we're going to do in those scenarios is we're going to interview at least 2 students for every article. It's going to include their name, what year they are at UC, and then obviously their quote.
And what do Wagstaff students think?
So keep that in mind and kind of keep that format in mind as well. Speaking of interviewing people, ask people how to spell their names. I grew up as Jeremiah Philip Massengale. That's still who I am. And that's just a nightmare to spell. But plenty of people that have names that sound a little bit more ordinary, like Chris or Abby or Kristen, can have their name spelled in a variety of different ways. And nothing is worse than having your name almost spelled correctly in the newspaper. Had students win Homecoming King and Homecoming Queen, and we did an article about it, and we got their name wrong, and they were less than thrilled because that's not who they are. Similarly, we need to also ask people, if they're a student, ask them what year they are, their major, that sort of thing. If they're a faculty or staff member, ask them their job title. So if you interview someone like Chris Odell, it's confusing to say Chris Odell who works on campus or Chris Odell in the psychology department. It's better if we make sure that we include their actual job title. And I wish I could tell you whatever you look up on Google or LinkedIn or the official college website, ucumberlands.edu, was correct, but that information is not always up to date. So ask the person, what's your job title?
Assistant Regional Manager.
So in this case, Chris Odell, who works on campus, becomes CHRIS Odell, Director of Student Development. One sounds not just more credible than the other, it's also accurate. Make accuracy your number one goal. Next tip, ask follow-up questions. You would be surprised how many people don't take the chance to ask a follow-up question in an interview. Simple things like why, or can you give me an example? So let's say you're doing an article about advice for freshmen, and you interview someone and their first piece of advice is you really need to put yourself out there and join clubs or activities on campus that you're interested in. Now that's a great quote by itself. It's a great quote for a TikTok video. But a much more interesting answer is to say, why is that important to you? Can you give me an example of a club you joined and how it made a difference in your life? And those are much more interesting stories, much more personal. So ask follow-up questions. You know, sometimes I'll have students interview a professor or a successful athlete, and they will say, oh, this is maybe the crowning achievement of my career, of my team, my time on this team, whatever. And no one says, can you tell me more about that? So ask follow-up questions. Be like Ariel. Be like Ariel.
I want more.
Don't settle for just a short answer. Want more and get more. When you're asking those questions, keep in mind who, what, when, where is good, but like I was saying earlier, the magic is in the answer to why. Going back to my restaurant article example, it's interesting, obviously, if there's a new restaurant and you can tell us the hours of that restaurant and who opened the restaurant and where it's located and that sort of thing and what type of food they serve, that's a great idea. But the real magic in that story is finding out the people that open that restaurant. What are their hopes and dreams for that restaurant? For people that love going to that new restaurant, what is it they like about it? Have them describe the food. Have them describe the excitement, energy, anxiety that comes with opening a new restaurant in town. The why is often where the good part of the story is. Take this example from one of my favorite movies, Mean Girls.
Yeah, I like math.
Ew, why?
Hi, follow-up question. Why? I like math. And I always love this answer.
Yeah, I like math.
Ew, why?
So, here's Katie's answer to that.
Because it's the same in every country. Because it's the same in every country.
Because it's the same in every country. The why is where the interesting part of the story often is. Other than that, some other things to keep in mind as we go a little bit faster. You want to be objective in your storytelling. Now, most people, when they're thinking about journalism, they're thinking about how biased, political coverage can be. And at the time I'm recording this video, it is election season. But you would be surprised how many articles about old-fashioned days or theater department tryouts or jazz band concerts or CAV events tell people to make sure and support this team, or make sure to get out and join this group, or make sure to attend this exciting event on campus. And it is not your job as a journalist to discourage people from doing things, but it's also not your job to be the PR agent for that group and to give them a quite advertising commercial kind of push. Instead, if you want people to encourage people to go to the event, to support the athletes, to buy the thing, whatever, get quotes from your interviewees to do that. Get quotes from the people in your story to do that. As a writer, you be objective. Don't tell people what to think or what to do. It's exhausting as a reader.
People will think what I tell them to think when you tell me what to tell them to think.
Yeah, something like that. So, be objective. Keep in mind your story is only as good as the quotes that are in it. That's why I've spent so much time talking about interviewing and quotes. Quotes are going to be what gives your story opinions, since as a writer you're not including them. They're going to give your story perspective, and often they will give your story emotion. So if someone is excited, they're nervous, they're energetic, they're brokenhearted, they are proud, they are whatever. Emotion is going to come from the quotes that you get. Because people have layers, and ogres have layers, and onions have layers. Our goal is to go beyond the surface level in our storytelling and use quotes not just for facts and figures, but to get to that opinion, that perspective, that emotion.
Ogres have layers. Onions have layers.
And hopefully the people in your story are going to reveal layers as well. At the same time, and I can't remember whose story did this recently, who turned in their story. Stories can't be just quotes. We call these sometimes stringers, where we look at an article and there's very little article. There's just quote, 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 quote. Keep in mind that you are the storyteller. And you need to use active voice and be in charge of telling the story just as much as your interviewees are. In fact, more than them, because you're the one that's getting the byline. You want to use active voice, so you want to be aware of things like the verb was or the word by showing up. So Sally drove her car off the road is active voice. It puts the subject at the beginning. Passive voice tends to end with the star of the sentence. And not only is that a little clunky, a little more boring, but it's less direct and it actually takes more words. So you want to try to use active voice when you can. If you're like, hey Jeremiah, I don't know the difference between active and passive voice, this is not the video to unpack that, but try to strive for active voice in that storytelling. One thing that I encourage beginning writers to do is to think about the reader's questions. If you were reading a story about Welcome Week, or about homecoming, or about the opening football game, or, to use my previous example, the opening of a new restaurant in town, what questions would you expect that story to answer? Often I encourage writers to make something on their notes app on their phone or on a scrap piece of paper, a post-it note, to write out the questions that you would hope that article answers. And then before you hit submit and send your article in to us via email, make sure it answers them. So try to do that. So if you're writing about, again, the local restaurant, you would want to make sure include where it's located, what's on the menu, how long they've been in business, what customers think, what the owner had in mind when they opened it, their business hours, an idea of the price point, so on and so on. You want to try to anticipate those questions. Like Loki says, expect the expected because your readers do.
Expect the expected.
You don't want someone to read your story and be more confused or more curious than when they started. We expect for the story to tell us things that are going to give us some new information. So, anticipate the reader's questions and then answer them in your storytelling. Finally, just a quick encouragement to proofread. I promise you in my heart of hearts that the best stuff that you've ever read, whether that was a novel, a short story, a screenplay, a poem, something that you've ever read that you thought was really interesting, really fascinating, that maybe moved you emotionally, I promise it was not a first draft. And so I would encourage you to take the time to proofread your stories, to read them out loud, to maybe run spell check, to maybe throw them into Grammarly. Part of the kicker with that is you have to finish the story long enough to give yourself enough margin and enough window of time to proofread it before the deadline. But please spend some time looking at your story before you send it in. Don't be satisfied with a crappy first draft, because when we hand in first drafts, we often are real self-aware, and we say things like in this next clip,
It's a first draft, remember, it's probably a mess.
And that's true, your first draft is probably a mess. However, you don't have to be satisfied with that crappy first draft. I promise you that people that read the newspaper are often people that are just really into reading, and the average person who does a lot of reading, like me, can tell when you've submitted a first draft.
It's a first draft, remember, it
ends up being something like this.
It's a first draft.
We can just tell. And so get the thing done on paper, then edit things, delete things, add things, move things, use Grammarly, use spell check, and make it better. Our goal of what we're doing here at the paper is just to serve campus, but also to help you grow as a communicator and a writer. And part of that growth is investing in yourself, in your own pieces, not just handing them to an editor or to me and saying, here you go, Morgan, good luck. Here you go, Jeremiah, make it better. Hopefully you can be involved in that process by making your first draft into a much better second draft and then turning that in.
It's a first draft.
Hopefully we won't be saying that. Finally, as we come to a close, I just want to say thank you.
I just like to smile. Smiling's my favorite.
Watching this video.
I just like to smile. Smiling's my favorite.
If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.